intelligent than the rest of us.
I agree.
And you have very sort of the upper class to proper
All right, colleagues and guests and all other good people that have come to this intergroup meeting, intergroup for animal welfare meeting here in Strasbourg, the 3rd of April, and we'll kick off the meeting, which will last 1 hour. And the theme of today's discussion is the Commission's proposal to amend the annexes of the Habitats Directive concerning the protection status of the wolf. Downgrading the wolf's status from strictly protected to protected has sparked a significant debate. Once adopted, this change will align EU law with the Berne Convention's recent decision granting member states greater flexibility in managing wolf populations, including increased culling. The wolf is a keystone species playing a crucial role in maintaining biodiversity and regulating ecosystems. However, concerns over livestock protection and human-wildlife coexistence have led to a growing pressure to revise its conservation status. While some argue that wolf populations have recovered sufficiently to justify reduced protections, conservation scientists and animal welfare organizations warn of potential risks, including genetic diversity loss, habitat fragmentation, and illegal killings. This proposal also raises broader questions about the EU's commitment to biodiversity conservation. Weakening legal protections of the wolf could undermine the EU biodiversity strategy and international conservation obligations, setting a precedent for other threatened species. Today's discussion will critically examine the legal coherence of the proposal within the Habitats Directive and international conservation treaties, the ecological role of wolves and the potential impact of reduced protection, the effectiveness of coexistence measures, and whether non-lethal conflict mitigation strategies have been sufficiently explored. Balancing biodiversity conservation with sectoral interest requires a robust, evidence-based approach. And we hope to learn more about this at our meeting today. Before we kick off the meeting, I will just make a couple of short announcements. So I will tell you that on Tuesday, the 8th of April, the Environment Committee, the ENVI Committee, will adopt the draft opinion by Manuela Ripa, who is with us today, on the protection of dogs and cats and their traceability. This draft opinion is highly welcomed by this group, and it is a significant strengthening of the Commission's proposal by incorporating certain crucial elements that were missing. So we hope that this opinion will serve as a source of inspiration for the Agri Committee's report, which will come later on, and that as many of its recommendations as possible will be integrated into the final report of the lead committee. So we wish you luck, Manuela, on the vote in the ENVI Committee the 8th of April. So I can tell you that this meeting will be live streamed on Interactio. It will be recorded, and the video recordings and presentations will be uploaded on the Intergroup website. And we have interpretation for English, French, German, Italian, and Polish. However, the first speaker, I will just tell you, we have a couple of speakers, and I will just introduce them. I will introduce our first speakers. We have one speaker from the European Commission who is working on the proposal on the revision of the Habitats Directive, and then we will have a representative from the Eurogroup for animals who will also tell about the NGOs or the animal welfare concerns that are linked to this proposal. But first, we will hear from the European Commission. It's Humberto Delgado Rosa, Director for Biodiversity at DG Environment in the European Commission. He has joined us online and will provide an overview over the Commission's proposal.
He has no, there is no interpretation.
Yeah, I will come to that. Including the rationale, he will also tell us about the rationale behind the suggested changes, the legal and scientific assessments underpinning the decision, and the anticipated implications for member states and stakeholders. And I will tell you that, unfortunately, we don't have interpretation for the first speaker here. He will speak in English, but he doesn't have the right microphone for the interpreters to translate his words. But I hope you will be able to follow anyway. He will have 10 minutes. So, Mr. Delgado Rosa, please, the floor is yours, and we look forward to hearing from the European Commission on the revision of the Habitats Directive. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, let me thank you, this Intergroup, for having me on what is a relevant and sensitive topic, which is the protection of the wolf. I will tell you some words about the proposal to change the Habitats Directive and its consequences and implications. Let me just add first, as a bit of a reminder on background, what's the history of the wolf in Europe? Well, one can say in very short words that it was heavily persecuted in much of Europe to the point of eradication of much of its usual habitat range. But so when moving, let's say, from eradication to protection, then we have seen an expansion again.
Sorry,
Yeah.
if you could just wait 1 minute, because then we will try to turn up the sound, because I think it is a little bit low. If members, maybe you need to use the headphones, then you will have a better sound, but we will just see if we can turn it up a little bit, so we make sure that we hear your words. Is that okay? Okay, we'll try one more time, and then you can also use the headphones, dear guests, if you have sound problems. Mr. Delgado, the floor is yours.
Sorry if my technical conditions are not ideal, But I was just doing a little summary of as after eradication and going to conservation, well, the wolf has expanded again and recolonized, or starting to recolonize much of its previous territory. So we have seen conflicts emerging, especially when the wolf was now coming anew after sometimes more than 1 century of absence. But it did get to quite an improved situation, and after a thorough analysis done by the Commission, the decision was taken to propose to lower the protection status from strict protection to protection. So that's where we stand now with this proposal, and I would go for the first slide, please, after this one. Well, so now on, let's say, on the legal background, the first step for this intention was to change in the Berne Convention the protection status of the wolf, and that was attained in 6 December by the adoption by the Standing Committee, a proposal from the EU to move the wolf from one annex, strictly protected fauna species, to another annex, actually appendix, of protected species. This amendment to the Berne Convention entered into force in the 7th March, and on the same date, the Commission has adopted a proposal to change the Habitats Directive accordingly related to the protection status of the wolf. The next slide, please. So the objective is not more than to align the Habitats Directive to what was attained in the Berne Convention. So it's a very targeted amendment of the Habitats Directive, just aiming to move the wolf from the annex of strict protection to the annex of protection, where management measures can be applied. As announced by the Commission, actually that was an announced commitment, this proposal is on the wolf and only on the wolf, and that's as such that it was tabled by the Commission. The next slide, please. So again, actually it amounts to move the reference to the wolf from the Annex 4 of the directive, which is the species and strict protection, to the Annex 5. What happens is, if this proposal is adopted, the wolf will be subjected to protection, as stated in Article 14 of the Habitats Directive. So it means that member states will need to take measures to ensure that whatever exploitation or management is compatible with maintaining or attaining favorable conservation status. So in essence, the strict protection regime of Article 12 of the directive would no longer apply to the wolf. It would be Article 14. And the dispositions, the requirements of Article 14 can be derogated as under the requirements of Article 16. But basically, it's a change of what kind of protection status does apply to the wolf. And the next one, please. Now, implications on this protection status. What happens in practice is that, yes, indeed, there will be more flexibility in managing wolf populations. By the way, let me start by saying that member states, of course, are not obliged to lower the protection status that applies in their member state if they don't want to lower it. But for those that would lower, or those that already have only protection regime, this amounts to more flexibility in managing the population. But now, an important point is it does not at all change a very clear obligation to ensure that the favorable conservation status of the wolf is either achieved or maintained, and particularly in what amounts to culling, to hunting, member states need to abide by the case law established by the Court of Justice. So basically, hunting may be restricted or even prohibited in case that would be needed to attain favorable conservation status. And in case when there is unfavorable conservation status, the member states must take measures to improve the situation, which can be, again, restricting somehow hunting. Particularly if there's a case when it's the loss of specimens, for whatever reason, even if not from hunting, that is in the way of favorable conservation status or against favorable conservation status, then it will be a particular case for having to be restrictive on removing further specimens. So in practice, and here the precaution principle will apply, in case of uncertainty, exploitation should be rather limited or even refrained. So this does not mean, and I will get back to that in a moment, that from now on it's shoot to kill as a policy, not at all. In terms of what this implies for monitoring the conservation status, well, it maintains as today. Every 6 years, member states do assess, they carry it very regularly under the Habitats Directive. They need to assess the conservation status of species based on 4 parameters. So the first one is population, the size, the trends, the structure. The second is the range, the area, the trend. The third is available habitat, again, the quantity, the quality, the trend, and also prospects, pressures, threats. This is what member states report to the Commission every 6 years. The next reporting cycle is actually this year in July 2025, and the Commission analyzes together with the environmental agency and we report. So the next report by the Commission is foreseen for 2026. And of course, if the monitoring suggests that is necessary, member states may need to implement temporary or local restrictions, prohibitions of taking or of hunting. I mentioned before, member states can decide to keep the wolf as a strictly protected species in their national legislation. A couple of member states at least have already announced they will do so. So member states can always go further than what that directive will require. And finally, very importantly, there's no change at all to the conditions for access to rules and preventive measures and supports in what amounts to coexistence. So coexistence will remain absolutely fundamental. So let me say, in addition to these more directly legal implications, I would comment as follows. First, what are the risks, the pros and cons? There's a pro, which is for part of stakeholders, this idea that protection is no longer strict or that it's somehow easier to remove conflict individuals or difficult individuals will increase acceptance. We cannot deal with wolf conservation under arm twisting with relevant stakeholders. From the side of risks, let's say, it comes from perceptions. The perception that now, well, we don't need to protect any longer the livestock, coexistence will not happen, we'll just shoot to kill, we'll get wolf-free zones, we need no prevention. This would be a very wrong approach and a risk that needs to be managed because first, I heard no single stakeholder claiming we want to get rid of wolves everywhere. What they want is to have their herds protected. And to have herds protected, a gun is not enough and sometimes can even be counterproductive. You do need preventive measures. They work, they've been applied elsewhere, and we will keep steering member states, it's their decision of course, on using the available funds, both EU funds or state aid, to ensure coexistence and prevention. I would also say there's no necessary correlation on the actual situation of the wolf and the protection regime applied. Nowadays, we already have some member states with only protection, others with strict protection, and it does not necessarily mean that it's better under strict protection than other than protection. I see my time is over. I would maybe just add one final comment, which is, conflicts with wolves are not correlated necessarily with the number of wolves. They are actually correlated when the wolves are coming anew and livestock is not protected because protection was not needed for long. So in essence, in spite of the change, having preventive measures and aiming to coexistence will remain as fundamental as ever, and that's a message we need to keep insisting. Mr. Chair, I will stop here and ready for further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much. And I think this gives us a lot of important knowledge on the wolves, on your proposal, basically, what it means and what it does not mean. Mr. Delgado, Rosa, you will be staying with us, I understand, until 10 minutes to 11, so we still have the opportunity to ask questions to you, and we thank you for your participation here. Before we get to that, we will hear from Leah Badoz, Wild Animals Program Officer at Eurogroup for Animals. She will present the conservation and ethical arguments for maintaining the current protection status of the wolves under the Habitats Directive. This includes an examination of population trends, threats to wolves in various regions, the effectiveness of non-lethal livestock protection measures, and the importance of ensuring long-term coexistence strategies. Dear Leah, you have 10 minutes as well. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fuglsang. Just waiting for the presentation. Thank you. So, yeah, I sit in front of you today with despair, and with also a lot of fear, fear for our future and the future of science-based policy making. I'm really here to tell you that this is not just another proposal to transpose an international decision. This is a proposal that really paves the way for the destruction of our environmental legislation, and really, unfortunately, I don't think I'm exaggerating. Next slide, please. So yes, first, so we hear from the Commission, and we see it in the proposal, that the sole argument of this proposal is to say that it is necessary to transpose the Berne Convention decision. Except that the EU can adopt stricter measures. It's not bound to simply transpose the Berne Convention. So this decision does not exempt the Commission to properly justify this proposal, and right now it is not the case. And this is a real obstacle to informed policymaking. How can we have discussions today if we do not know how this proposal is truly motivated? Next slide, please. But really, I want to emphasize that this proposal is very dangerous. It's very dangerous because it goes against science, it goes against democracy and the people, and it also goes against the interest of farmers. Next slide. So first, it's a proposal against science. So we heard from the Commission, indeed, management would have to be compatible with the species being maintained at a favorable conservation status. But we all understand here that the goal is really to cull wolves. And so we would need to have some kind of quotas, right? But what are we talking about here? And as the Commission said, the next reporting period is coming up, so we do not know yet what we are talking about. And actually, the latest data that we have show that only 1 out of the 7 biogeographical populations had a favorable conservation status. So this proposal seems a bit rushed, to say the least. And also what I want to really draw your attention on is scrutiny on the data that is going to be presented by the member states, because this will be really the difference between extension and keeping a favorable conservation status. So I know I'm a presenter, but I have also a question for the Commission, which is like how the Commission will ensure that the data provided by the member state is reliable. This is really a key point, and I do not see the answer here. Next slide. And also it's important to see that even if some populations can have a favorable conservation status, it does not mean that the threats are addressed. And so here are the main threats to wolf populations today. And for example, on illegal killing, we do not know exactly the scope of it because a lot of it goes under the radar, of course. But what we know, and there are many studies that actually demonstrate it, is that legal culling exacerbates illegal killing. Like there are more cases of illegal killing when you have legal culling. So the listing in Annex 5 will actually make this threat worse. And the two other threats that I did here, it just goes to show that the the status of the populations, their health, their welfare is really affected. They have a very poor genetic diversity, and so these wolf populations are also dying from the inside, and this is something that is really not adequately considered, unfortunately. Next slide, please. This is also a proposal that goes against public opinion. So we conducted a survey in 2023 in 10 member states, and we really focused on rural inhabitants because they are the ones that have to deal directly with the return of the wolf. And what we see is that even among rural communities, there is a very large support for the strict protection status of large carnivores, 68% actually. So this just goes to show that even rural people want more protection for nature. Next slide, please. And we also often hear that people feel unsafe because of the return of large carnivores, but in the reality, in this survey, we see that only 32% said that they actually feel unsafe because of the presence of large carnivores. And also in the same survey, we found out that 44%, so 10 points more, feel unsafe going out during the hunting season. So is culling really the solution for people to feel safer? It doesn't seem like it. Next slide, please. And yes, the return of the wolf was not accompanied at all by massive communication for people to know how to react in case of an encounter, what type of behavior they have to adopt. And maybe this is more needed because 62% said that they would actually feel safer. So maybe instead of culling, we could have more communication to inform the people as well. This is absolutely lacking. Next slide, please. And maybe most importantly, this is a proposal that goes against the farmers. So the wolf doesn't eat farmed animals. Like the very vast majority of the wolf diet is composed of wild ungulates. And this is very important to keep healthy ungulate populations and healthy ecosystems. So we really need the wolves and other apex predators for this ecosystem. This is also important for farmers, this is important for society, this is really an added value for everyone. And actually only 0.065% of the total EU sheep population is killed by wolves annually. Now we are not saying that this number is insignificant and that we should not do nothing about it, but we know what the solutions are and we really know it. Next slide, please. Over the decades, the EU invested really millions into developing, testing, and implementing these preventive measures that are proven effective. We really have the studies showing that lethal management is the least efficient method. And the problem with this proposal is, despite what the Commission just said, this proposal will lead to decreased funding for farmers. That is very needed. And the maths are very simple. If you have a budget to dedicate to biodiversity protection, are you going to dedicate it to Annex 4 strictly protected species or to Annex 5 species? Well, of course, the wolf will lose its priority for this type of funding. So I'm really concerned that this will further condemn farmers instead of helping them. Next slide, please. And the last point, and this is a very important point, so we have this proposal today that indeed is only focused on the wolf, but still puts the whole Habitats Directive in jeopardy. We do not know what are the risks to the main provisions or even the risks to the other species. We are playing with fire here and running the risks of having a weakened Habitats Directive that puts our biodiversity in a very terrible situation. And this is absolutely unacceptable. And I think that EU citizens, they expect decision makers to really to do better, because we are facing a major biodiversity crisis, and this is really not what we need. So yeah, this proposal really goes against science policymaking. It goes away from helping farmers. It goes away from effective solutions. This is really not going in the right direction, and this is why we really urge you and all EU decision makers to reject it, and also to make sure that the Habitats Directive is not weakened and is not damaged. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Leah. And thank you very much, Mr. Delgado Rosa. Now, we heard from both the European Commission and the Eurogroup for Animals some arguments for the proposal, what the proposal does, what it does not do, and some arguments, I would say, against the proposal. And now I would open up the floor for questions and comments. Michel, you have the first comment, and then we note those who raised their hands. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the floor and for this opportunity. Well, probably you already know my opinion on this. I think that Commission has taken a very wrong step into a very wrong direction by opening Habitat Directive and allowing and simply introducing the downgrading of the protection of wolf. The indication for that and the reason for that, why I think it is like that, is that if the goal of the Commission is actually to increase the damage done by depredation, it can't be done by cooling. Like the science is very clear about that. It's not related to cooling, and the cooling is simply just happening, and the decrease in damage is not happening. So if the goal is actually to allow trophy hunting, then Commission will be successful. That's how it is. But I'm much more concerned, and even beyond the wolf. The problem with wolf is really, really very big. I know for myself, because I know what a quota hunting actually means. I see it in Slovakia, and there is so many loopholes that allow actually a gray zone of hunting very close to protected areas, proposing the quota based on non-scientific approach, that all will be a status quo in all Europe, according to this proposal. And I don't think this is a good approach. But the question that I actually have, with the composition of the Parliament and with the composition of the Council, there is a huge risk that we will not stick to the Commission's proposal, and some groups will propose amendments that will ask for the downgrading of the protection of many other species: wolf, bear, lynx, otter, beaver, I don't know, eagle, seals. You name them. Everyone can pick one, two, and maybe even habitats. How can we prevent that? How is Commission going to prevent that? And what steps will it actually undertake in order to prevent this scenario, which is very realistic? Both in Commission and both in Parliament, there are possible majorities to actually ask to downgrade a whole bunch of species and really to disintegrate the habitat protection and the Habitat Directive as it is. How can we prevent that? And is Commission actually took proper steps if this is the scenario that they actually allowed to do by opening this Pandora box that we see right now? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michel. Jessica.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to both speakers. I have questions for both, if that's okay. So I would like to start with Mr. Delgado Rosa. Thank you very much for your explanation. I'm very happy with the proposal of the Commissioner of the Commission to change the status of the wolf. I'm coming from the Netherlands, where we face serious problems because of the dense population that we have, both in people and livestock, and the wolf. I have a couple of questions for you. First, is the Commission assuming that all wolves arrived by themselves in all the territories? And if that's not the case, if they are purposely introduced, is it still the obligation for us to keep the population? That's something I think we really need to talk about. Do we need to look at the wolf? Because don't get me wrong, I'm not against protecting the wolf. I think the wolf is a perfectly wonderful animal, but I think we need to place certain places where the wolf can really do his natural behavior and be natural. So Do we need to keep population on a member state basis? Because the wolf doesn't stick to the boundaries of the member states because, you know, they have a territory that surpasses member states. So shouldn't we be looking at population based on a more larger region than only the member states? Because by keeping it at a member state, it is actually unnecessarily complicated. The other question I have is how do we explain unnatural behavior? Because when the wolf first arrived in the Netherlands, we had wolf experts explaining us what to expect from the wolf. So in that sense, I agree, we need education for people. But what we see is that the wolf doesn't fulfill the expectations of the experts, at least not in the Netherlands. I cannot talk for other countries. So we see that the wolf doesn't go away from encounters with humans, and we have a lot of human encounters, and we also have some accidents already with wolves attacking humans. So that's a question I have. Then you mentioned the possibility to have a derogation from Article 14. Could you explain that to me, how that works? And then for the last speaker, you say we have attacks correlating with preventive measures, but because of this atypical behavior that we see in the Netherlands, we see tremendous amounts of attacks on livestock. So only in the last 5 years we had 2,500 sheep lost. And I can have a long list of other livestock that was attacked, which I will not do. And the last point I want to make is, you mentioned democracies, like people in rural areas want to have the wolf. Well, in the Netherlands, there's less than 40% of the population that believes there is a space for the wolf in the Netherlands, and most of them live in urban areas. If you go to rural areas, this number that actually accepts the wolf being there is a lot lower. So yes, I believe we need to take democracy into account, but the numbers may not be the way you believe they are, because only 10 member states were interviewed. I'm assuming the Netherlands was not one of them.
Thank you very much, and Mrs. Badoz will get the chance to answer, of course. Sirpa, you have the floor.
Thank you, and sorry for using a bit longer intervention. But coming from Finland and being in the middle of the wolf story from the another angle for a long time, the wolf isn't a symbol and icon animal not only on biodiversity and ecosystems, but it is on our mental structures. And that's why a lot of urban legends and myths are intertwined with wolves. Probably you haven't, but if you want, please do read a book called Women Who Run with the Wolves. That sort of tells about the misogyny and wild hatred and how they are intertwined. You hate something that you can't control, and then you symbolize that something needs to be, that is wild, that is scary, that needs to be controlled. And this is the mindsetting behind there. And there's a lot of urban stories in Finland, wolves eating children, never happened. There's a lot of sayings that, okay, if you beware, or the wolf will come. This is told to children, for example, and so forth and so forth. So we would need to understand that there's a lot of intertwined hatred towards the wild and sort of approving the manhood, the ability to protect on these actions against the wolves. Okay. Then it is quite often, because of that, very difficult to very calmly and sort of deeply discuss about the wolf population and wild animal protection. But then, what are cases here? And you said it already on the introduction, at least in Finland. Not all measures has been taken to protect the farmed animals, and still you get the allowance to kill the animals. So anyway, if there are that kind of a deranged individuals, like wolf attacking sheep or threatening dogs or what, you always basically get, according to the existing Habitat Directive, the allowance to kill the individuals. And even some herds, if that is analyzed, that this whole herd is too habitated with human beings. So we can tackle with that issue. Then the second point is this kind of a thinking that there is a slot there somewhere in the wilderness, where all the wolves and bears and biodiversity and whatever, they are fenced and protected, and we humans are here. Wolves not, deers not, bugs not, do not enter, or we kill you. Luckily, we don't do that with the tourists that are strangers too. And this mindset thing is difficult for us. And that's why it is so notoriously important in politics. And now I'm not blaming anyone. But when politics is difficult and extremes are rising, you need this kind of a fast action to show your voters, yes, this bothers you, I deal with that. And this is behind all the Habitat Directive and wolf protection. And as said, it doesn't stop here. There's on the line already the lynx, the bear, the otter, the seals, and other species. Then let's go on the other side. What should we do, and what is the challenge? Firstly, the nature protection doesn't depend on our acceptance, and we should accept that point. Whether you like or you do want to have wolves here or not. No, it is the state of the herd and the state of the protection and the level of how endangered that species. It's a bit like you might want to have an operation or not, but if you have a disease, you have a disease. So this is more or less biologically based. And I'll start with that. If you look on this and you look at the coming Kunming agreement and Roma last meeting, actually it states that we should increase our nature and biodiversity protection. We should do more active actions. And then the question is that the Habitat Directive should go on this direction. More protection, not less protection. And then my case is that this actually is against the Kunming commitments that we have undersigned. And I guess we should try to raise the case on these bases and to talk with some lawyers and so on, because we can't say, yes, this is what we are committing, and then do quite opposite actions on the other hand. Thank you. Sorry for taking your time.
Thank you, Sirpa. Then we have Valerie. You have the floor.
Excusez-moi. Désolée.
Sorry, thank you very much for those presentations. Well, I don't quite agree with you because I raise livestock and I've lost some animals. So I'd like to speak on behalf of the breeders. There's a fair number of us here in Europe. Over 10 years, it's been doubling. So that means 40,000. And we've had 65,000 attacks on our animals. And you earlier talked about fear. We're terrified. We're the ones who are being attacked. And there's no hate. We have no intention of exterminating the wolf. That's not the point. What we want is less pressure. Because when you have sheep and you want to see them out there in the fields, and we're a animal welfare intergroup, we want our animals to be reared in a natural environment. We don't want them locked up. We want them out in the field, extensive breeding, not intensive. And the pressure on our animals, it is too high. The pressure on our farmers, it's just too much, because you end up on your own trying to sort out these problems. We don't really get any help. You suggested we get more dogs, more fencing, and wolves know how to deal with that. They're as smart as can be, so they adapt. And you talk about biodiversity, but the problem with biodiversity is that it's a whole environment you're talking about. And at present already in our mountains, when it comes to our wild animals, they are being attacked by wolves. And there's a number of animals that have disappeared to the detriment of our hunters. And you're going to, before we talk about wild boar, for instance, the wolf is as clever as can be. The wolf is going to, before attacking a wild boar, the wolf is going to start by going for, quote, low-hanging fruit, i.e., easy to kill, readily available animals, farmed animals. And I'm about to wrap up. So when we talk about Annex 5 for wolves, and it's for the state, really, for the government to decide in each country what is appropriate. And if the government doesn't take the right measures in respect of our livestock breeding, we're going to lose our farmers, we're going to lose our know-how, and our animals, we love them. We don't want them to be torn to shreds by wolves. And do you realize if we defend ourselves, we'll end up in jail. And predators don't have any predators, so don't forget about us. Thank you very much, Valerie, for those important points.
To pass the floor to Mr. Delgado. Rosa, he needs to leave shortly, so he will get to reply on some of the comments. Then you will get the floor, but he needs to answer now. Mr. Delgado Rosa, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, on all the questions. I'll try to be telegraphic. There are many interesting points I want to make. I'll try to cover the most of them in the time available. Let me start where I agree. There are many myths about wolves, indeed. I've faced them currently in, let's say, member states where, let's say, bears do provide fatal attacks and are not feared, while the wolf is barely present and is feared. That's a real issue. There's another myth, though, which is the myth that the wolf is coming back because of active reintroduction. There's not a single case of active reintroduction of wolves we are aware of. It certainly didn't happen under any of the programs of restoration conservation. So I think it's often forgotten that wolf ecologically expands because the males cannot stay next to the predominant male, and they can walk many, many miles per day. And so the expansion is totally natural as far as we know. The second point of agreement is, yes, wolves are needed in EU's ecosystems as elsewhere, because when livestock is protected, then the wolf can fulfill its ecological role, namely preying on other wild ungulate species and controlling, including wild boar and so forth. So let's say if the developed Europe could not cope with having large carnivores protecting their herds, what would we expect then for less developed regions of the world on then tigers, lions, jaguars, or pumas? So it's very important to indeed the EU be able to maintain its wolf population. Now, I don't agree at all that with this proposal to downgrade the status of the wolf, we would be destroying all environmental legislation, not even the Habitats Directive. I would, don't forget, the Commission was very clear, its proposal is on the wolf and only the wolf. So, although the Habitats Directive certainly has its political foes, the Commission still maintains the right of initiative, and I think it would denaturate the proposal to go beyond the wolf in this context. And now, there are some question why, if I understood, while the Berne Convention changes, we don't necessarily need to change it in the EU. Well, the Berne Convention changed out of a proposal from the EU. So, of course, member states can decide not to lower the protection status of the wolf, but it would be simply illogical that we would not be tabling this proposal to change the directive. One can disagree with that option, but we have based that, well, in this thorough assessment done on the situation of the wolf and then the political decision to propose downgrading from protection to strict protection. And I reinforce, and that was said, exploitation must be compatible with favorable conservation status. So it is by no means a shoot-to-kill provision everywhere. And by the way, I would also like to signal, under strict protection, there has been culling, as from the derogations allowed by Article 16 of the directive. So I would be very interested if there's any evidence from legal culling favoring illegal culling, because that's not our perception. And if that was happening, it did not change because we already had legal culling ongoing in member states. Actually, this is an important point. There has been quite a lot of flexibility within strict protection. Some member states with strict protection actually making resort frequently to derogations, and others barely so. So the situation, as I said in the beginning, of the situation of the level of the conservation status of the wolf and culling, not culling, was not correlated necessarily with the being under strict protection or simple protection. And now, I agree that culling is not necessarily a good solution. Sometimes when you kill the wrong problematic wolf, well, the whole herd, the whole pack can go rogue and start feeding on livestock themselves. So, but it's true that some stakeholders do feel safer if they consider that culling is an easier option. This seems to be a fact. By the way, we also agree. The divide is not urban-rural. We know of many urban stakeholders that dislike the idea of the presence of the wolf, and likewise many rurals that like. But of course, the consequences of the wolf presence are much more felt in rural context. And there, this is absolutely fundamental. Where it was said, well, if now there's culling, there will be less funding for prevention. That would be a big mistake. Of course, member states have a say on that, but it's easy to understand that if you have no prevention, one single wolf is enough to kill many animals if the sheep, for instance, are unprotected. And the idea that we can just keep culling or have someone with a rifle every moment is a wrong idea. So prevention is as fundamental as always in whatever regime. We have been favoring coexistence and prevention for long as Commission. We have supported the EU platform for coexistence and several regional platforms for dialogue on coexistence. Many live programs have shown prevention works, not 100%, but often 90+% if properly applied, depending on tuning it to the local circumstances. And we have also been active on awareness raising on how to behave with wolves and so forth. Let me see if there's something. Yes, the issue of monitoring. Monitoring is done by member states, including at the local and regional level. They must do it at that level, but there's also assessment at biogeographical level. That's what we do with the EA. But this idea that, well, neighboring member states have wolves, so I don't need to have them, is not compatible with the legislation indeed. On the naturalness of the behavior of wolves, first, they don't look at humans as their prey at all. Now, of course, there are cases where there are so-called bold wolves, wolves that have learned, well, I have here an easy meal on these sheep or these pets, and those are the ones that can become problematic and that have often been culled under derogation, even under strict protection. Maybe my final point, I hope I did not forget anything fundamental. The final point is we don't think at all that what we are proposing is incompatible with the global biodiversity framework. First, to begin with, protection, simple protection already existed in the EU for some member states. And in those member states, we don't have necessarily a worse situation of wolf populations. The global biodiversity framework is about sustainable use and coexistence, and that's what we favor overall in the Habitats Directive as ever before, and especially coexistence prevention. And then we can reap also the rewards of having the ecological role of the wolf in our ecosystems. Maybe I would stop here, Mr. Chair, with my apologies for not staying longer. I actually have a meeting that has started already, and I'll run for it.
Go ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Delgado Rosa. Now we have 5 minutes, and I have Sebastian, Christina, and Manuela. I'm sorry, could I ask you to do it in 1 minute, your intervention, and then we'll have a quick response. Sebastian.
Thank you, Niels. I will continue in German. Schade, dass
It's a shame that Mr. Delgado Rosa had to leave, because his number of wolves, the figures he gave when it comes to the number of attacks, there's monitoring every number of years. So the next monitoring is going to take place in 2030. And if there's going to be all these attacks, and there's also road accidents with wolves. And I mean, and also when it comes to what Leah said, I can't help thinking we have to be so objective. So why the colleagues here, don't they take account of real scientific evidence instead of fake news from these attacks that didn't actually take place, and that hunters don't have any animals to kill anymore? And of course, wolves go for easy prey, and a lot of attacks can be prevented where there's not enough of prevention. So it's a matter of protecting animals. And then there's a statistic, when we get a figure that most of the rural people don't have a problem, to talk about people who want or don't want a wolf. I don't want a wolf in my neighborhood, but I do want them to get the upgraded status. So there's these urban legends about bad wolves, etc., etc.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Christina.
Thank you very much. I will speak Italian. Anzitutto vi ringrazio.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for this discussion. I am a breeder, and I was a victim of the wrong approach taken when it comes to wolves who have attacked animals, and it created a drama and a tragedy in my area. It's triggered. It was a herd, and there's uncontrolled attacks in my area. And I want to protect my animals, and I do that by having people protect my animals. So it's very important to bear in mind that prevention, if it's well done, it can work. And that also there's 55% of attacks, but also has happened in my region. Prevention can't be standardized. Here, prevention, take the money, including the funds. No, you have to take account of individual circumstances. And that's why in my part of the world, farmers are very unhappy. And when it comes to the SOS, in terms of the Habitat Directive, and how can farmers take appropriate action if they don't have the funds for prevention? And just to try to understand, how can we help to better use the funds, spend the money better, and not just put the burden on the farmers. And thank you.
Gotcha. Manuela?
Thank you very much. It will be very short because we don't have time anymore. The thing is, of course, we want to protect farm animals. There's no question about it. And of course, we want to protect biodiversity, and this means also protect the wolf. What we need is effective solutions, and this would have been my question to the Commission, but maybe you can also answer it. What are effective solutions? The thing is that it is proven that shooting a single wolf can weaken the social structure of the wolf pack, meaning then they will go for the easy prey, the farm animals, because it's not their natural behavior to go to farm animals. We have seen the statistic that they're going for the wild animals, not for the easy prey. But if the social structure of the wolf is weakened, then they go for the easy prey. And then my question would have been, what are really effective targeted solutions? Is it what my colleague said? What can we do? How can we have the targeted prevention measures than shooting? Because shooting of single wolves will only worsen the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuela. And sorry for being so short on time. There are really many good perspectives here, and the discussion will go on. If you have 2 minutes, it's 11 o'clock, but if you have 2 minutes, I know the interpreters will stop now. But Lea, if you have... there's another meeting that will start. So actually, if we have 1 minute, maybe if you have a comment, Lea, then...
Yes, sure. No, I will just say culling is exactly not the solution. It's biologically explained. And the solution on culling for preventive attacks would be to completely exterminate the wolf. And this is not even feasible, and this is not what we want. When you remove a pack from an area, it will be replaced by another pack. We just have to coexist. We just have to live with this. And fortunately, we have the solutions. We have developed them. We have these preventive measures. And I completely agree with you. We need more efforts to ensure that the farmers have the right funding and the right knowledge to put in place these measures in the best way, and also to maintain them. This is also the challenge, to make sure that they can maintain it. So we are 100% behind farmers on this, but really culling will not help.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this discussion. I'm sure it will keep on going. And we need to work on this. We need to legislate on this, basically. So thanks for the perspectives, and I'll see you next time.